So I was thinking today that I would start a series of conversations about, um, I guess, life lessons or things that I've learned over the years from my actual life experience. Because up until now, I've been, pulling cards from, that are more universal that I created for open doorways. Then I was thinking how the doorways are really just prompts for me to talk, right? So those cards are not really necessary per se for me to talk to experiences that might help people. I guess that's why the whole point of the lantern room is that over the years, I'm a teacher. So I've taught thousands of kids. And I was writing to that and reflecting on that notion of teaching, and how over the years when a student would come to see me with an issue or a problem, I would be able to pull from my life experience and maybe give them a story that might help them, ground them. And then often I would leave them with a little it's kind of, like a little prescription, right? Here's what you can do in a practical way to help you get through this moment that's difficult. And we've talked to all kinds of topics, and I thought, do I really need oracle cards or tarot or whatever? And not really. It's just that it's helpful to start with a prompt or an idea. So I think I'm going to do that, and we're going to do a series, and we'll see where it goes. It's basically me starting with a reflection about something, and giving you a story, and let's just try it. And this whole lantern room experiment is basically an experiment that is meant for me to put it out there, and whoever needs to hear it hears it. And I'm going to try to be as real and authentic as possible without necessarily naming names, right? So if I'm speaking to a particularly personal topic, I won't name names. I'll try to be respectful of the people who might have been in my past. But I believe that people who go through a lot of different experiences, there's a reason for that. And it's meant often to maybe bring enlightenment or help other people through the same or similar experiences. So we're going to start with something I've been thinking about lately, and that's the topic of reciprocity. The reciprocity is the idea of give and take in an equal way, right? Give and take in an equal way. And I find that it's been something that I've had to come back to over the years many, many times with different people, whether it be in relationships, like love relationships, or whether it be with friendships, whether it be at work. And reciprocity, I was listening to someone talk about the notion of valuing oneself. What is it about giving people that makes them go outward and give, and not expect to be given back to in a reciprocal way? Now, it's easy to turn around and go, well, that's that person's problem because they're not giving back in the way that I'm giving. When really, we need to look at it differently, I think. We need to look at it in a way of why am I accepting less than I'm worth in terms of, right, reciprocal action? Why do I continue to give to someone or to a situation or at work or wherever when the value that I'm giving isn't being reflected back? So then you have to go back and think, well, where in my life did that begin, right? That overgiving and that undervaluing, right? Because you wouldn't, if you saw two children in a playground, and one was always wanting to cooperate and collaborate and they were just being generous with their time, they're inclusive and come and play, and here's my ball, and the other kid is just taking, and it like takes the ball, runs away with it, isn't being collaborative and reciprocal, you'd say, hey, let's go play with someone else who's being nice, right? You wouldn't say to the kid, oh, go and give more to that kid, expecting that maybe that kid's gonna like eventually learn. I'm like, all right, that kid's not being nice and not in your there. You and that child, you obviously not, right? So why is it that we don't do that for ourselves? So I'm thinking of like, where did this begin with me? Because in my life, I have a pattern of overgiving, and it's not always served me. In fact, sometimes it's depleted me, right? And as much as I like to talk about the well, filling the well, I talk about filling the well because I'm applying it to my own life experience. We need to value ourselves enough so that when someone isn't being reciprocal, we were like, no, I don't deserve that kind of treatment, and I'm going to give somewhere else where the value is reciprocal. So what's the first relationship or friendship that comes to mind when it comes to that? I guess my own life, when I was a child, my parents were very young when they had us, my brother and I, very young, like very, very young, 16, 17. They had come from traumatic childhoods themselves, and they were just basically in their own little world. They had us, they had us, but they were in their own world. You know, they were hippies. It was the 70s. My mother was 16 when she fell pregnant with me, 17 when she had me. Then she had my brother at 18. And really, they moved out to a 3-acre piece of land in the middle of nowhere, and they were just surviving. And my mother was an idealist. She had this idea in her mind of what the right life would be, and it didn't always turn out that way. In fact, most often it didn't. But she was an optimist, right? It's just that meanwhile, while they're both going through their thing, as 16, 17, 20-year-olds do, well, they had 2 kids. And so I was a very kind of like, it was a grown-up kid way before I was grown up, right? So I was 6 years old, and I was watching over my parents and making food and, you know, doing chores and cleaning the garden and getting ready for school and making my own lunches if we had even adequate food, right? I was watching over my mother when she was sad, and my father was most often not there or not present, and when he was present, he was absent because he was dealing with his own trauma, and so was my mother. But as a child, I learned, I guess, to be a grown-up and to take care of people. And that's very, very young, right? And my little brother, well, like as well, he was a year younger than I was, and we were just both of us managing. So I grew up, even when I was 12, I had decided, I went to school, and school was the first place where people gave to me. Teachers would watch over me. They would give me little treats. They would let me read. They would give me some measure of peace, a little peaceful environment. School was the first place where I experienced a certain measure of reciprocity. I had a little friend that I made when I was, I guess, 5 years old, 6 years old. We were the only 2 English-speaking kids in the school, and that's how we bonded. And we would do everything together for those first few years. So that was a little reciprocal relationship, right? It was a friendship. That's what friendship is. You give, they give. We would walk around with those, you know, we would tie a rope around our middle legs and walk around the 3-legged walk. And we did little things, and reciprocity, give and take. It became a friendship. It was the first time. maybe not the first time. I had a little neighbor, her name was Susan, and we would spend some time in the woods, and there's the woods between her house and my house, and it was playtime. It was like kind of like a little safe space. My house was very chaotic and traumatic, but like it was a safe space, this little woods, and that was my first little friend. But I think my actual first friend in school, Roxanne, is the one I remember, and we had this friendship. But I didn't really trust people to stay, because in my life, people didn't really stay. They came and went. It was very chaotic, and there wasn't a lot of stability. So I guess I learned at school that and I was a smart kid, and I was very observant, and I didn't talk much, contrary to now, but I didn't talk much, and I was just very observant. And I thought, and I was quite mature for my age, I think, I would perform, right? I would do well at school, and then I worked very hard, because our family were hard workers, and I learned that hard work and persistence and resilience, and you work hard and you give and you do. I knew I wanted to become a teacher. I was quite young. At one point, I thought maybe I'd become a war journalist, because I thought I can write, I could photograph, I could travel, and I could give back. I've always had that desire to give back, right? To use my talents for good. And I think it's a cool, honorable goal. But if you don't balance it, if you don't learn to also receive, right, give and take, then that you become depleted, and then the whole purpose of like being able to continue that, right, a life of purpose, it doesn't work. So I guess over time I ended up in relationships, either friendships or partners or love connections, where I learned that giving was a way of being seen, perhaps, right? And I ended up giving so much that I kind of abandoned my own needs, which is very not good. For an English teacher, it's a very bad way of saying it, but you abandon your own needs because you're constantly giving, right? And then that, because you overgive, sometimes the other person doesn't know how to match that. And if they don't know how to match that, what are you doing? Why are you with those people? Why are they your friends, right? Would you say to a friend, just keep giving to that person who's not giving back? So I learned that givers have to kind of match with givers. And also going outside oneself for validation, right? Why am I giving? Why am I giving so much? What is going on here? Is that a measure of wanting to be seen? How about we give to ourselves a little bit? It's not selfish to give to yourself. It's not selfish to feel your well. And I think for a long time, I felt like it was that. It was a sense of being selfish because you were taking care of yourself, right? You take time to rest. You take time to listen to music. You take time to do art. And sometimes in very patriarchal societies, women are encouraged to do that. They are. They're encouraged to just, sacrifice, the nature of sacrifice, right? And so the whole segment of society thinks that, well, it's the right thing to do is to sacrifice constantly. And women tend to do that. And we also give ourselves the title of fixers, right? We will fix things. So we don't give space to our partners even to step into a role of reciprocity in terms of partnership. So, oh no, I can do it. It's like we think we can do it better, right? So we assume that role because it validates us to have a role as a parent of like, well, I'm a parent, I am a mother, I am the one who, right? So where's the room for the partner to step in and be reciprocal? So these are a lot of thoughts already about the idea of reciprocity. I guess at one point, the conversation has to be, what are you doing exactly? Are you trying to fix the person by being a giving person? Are you respecting that person can figure their own lives out? Maybe the better thing would be to give to yourself, not in a selfish way, but take care of yourself and let people come to you. Let people come to you. And then if you're giving and you see that they're not sometimes also being there for you, well, then maybe it's time to reevaluate those relationships. And that's where I learned, it's coming full circle, I swear, the nature of, okay, what happens when you're an older person? Then you've spent several years in this idea of give. Oh, and I would make excuses for people's reasons. I would do that. I'm gonna own it. I would say, oh, that person is just going through a rough patch, and that's why they're not. Or they've had a very traumatic life, and that's why they're like selfish. Or that person is they're self-centered because this, that, and the other thing. And you can excuse many people's problems away, or excuse reasons why people aren't givers for many reasons. But the fact is, many of us live through traumatic lives and still are open and still are generous and still are giving, right? We can have a whole baggage of stuff that has happened to us, and we are still recognizing the value of being generous with our time, with our attention, of being loving, of being kind, of being loyal, of having right action. There are right actions. And sometimes you just don't align with certain people. You don't have to be like a high horse and say, well, I'm perfect and therefore you're not generous and out. But at one point, when people aren't reciprocal, it can drain you and you will have nothing left to give. And so healthy relationships have to be a kind of a measure of give and take. Now, I have amazing friends, and friends who have been with me through divorce, through the raising of my teens. They've been with me through moves. They've supported like big changes in my life. Even when they didn't understand, they'd be like, I don't know what Lisa's doing now, but she's doing this thing, so we need to be there for her. And I have tried to do the same for them. It's not always an even thing, but those people I cherish. Those people I would walk through over hot coals for. Those are the people that you can call in the middle of the night and you're snot crying and you're like, oh, this thing happened. Now, I don't do that very much because I'm hyper independent. I'm probably too independent, but when I've needed them, they've been there for me. That's reciprocity, right? The people who aren't there for you in those difficult times, when you have been there for them through difficult times, well, those are the people when you do kind of sit back and reflect, you're like, well, maybe some distance is good. And this is where we come to the final step in this talk is the idea of boundaries, right? So doesn't mean they're bad people, but you're just not aligning with them anymore. If you notice that a person isn't being reciprocal, say, simple example. I meet someone, it's someone new, and I'm like, oh, they're so interesting, and I want to make a friend, right? Like, oh, you're so interesting, so let's have a coffee, and we exchange information. We sit down, we have a coffee, and I'm like, hey, I invited you. Let me pay for your coffee. Great, wonderful. You have a nice conversation, and you could leave with good vibes. And you're like, oh, maybe that's a friend or a potential friend. Then you go home and you do your thing, and the person doesn't ever reach out to you again. Well, that's information. Like, what are you going to do? Reach out again and say, hey, let's have another coffee? Even if the first experience was a good one, if that other person doesn't take time to say, hey, they reply back to you or say, hey, like, you're like, we had a great coffee the other day. Would you like to go out and have a drink somewhere? Would you like to go for a walk? If that person isn't coming back to you with this sort of back and forth flow, why would you continue reaching out? There's all kinds of people in the world. Some people you connect with just briefly. Some people you connect with over time. Some people will align. Some people won't. And I think the best friendships that I have are those people, right, who, for example, will invite me to their cottage for a weekend. Wonderful. I live in the city now. Amazing. I'm going to show up with all of the wonderfulness of me, but I'll also bring presents. I'll bring food. I'll bring drinks, and maybe I'll take pictures I'm a photographer, so maybe I'll take pictures, and maybe I'll give back in the way that I give back. That's reciprocity. And then maybe I'll invite them to my place in the city, and they can live this wonderful experience of being in the city. It's time, it's attention, it's loyalty, it's honesty. Honesty is huge. We'll have a whole talk about that another time. But reciprocity, it's a give and take, back and forth flow. And then there's boundaries. So I, over the years, have had moments in my life where I've had to sit back and reflect on, who is being reciprocal, who is draining my energy. Why am I allowing my energy to be drained? Why am I allowing that? What is going on? Is it a matter of valuing myself enough to go, no, you like, why are you doing that, Lisa? Like, why? What's going on here? So then I've had to sometimes have very difficult conversations and distance myself from people because our values don't align. They don't value me for what I'm worth, and I am allowing it because I don't see my own value. Anyways, I hope that helps. This is a first conversation that I'm using without any kind of cards, but I'm reflecting out loud, which is what I do all the time. I reflect out loud. I tell stories, and I hope that helps you. I hope it maybe guides you a little bit. And I'm going to leave us with a question so that maybe this will help. Maybe you can write to it if you want. Where in your life are you still carrying a relationship by yourself? Where in your life are you still carrying a relationship by yourself? And what might change if you stopped crossing the entire distance alone? What might change if you stop crossing the entire distance alone? I'll leave you with that. I'm hoping to do a reflection like this every day onto different topics, and I'm hoping to be as honest and authentic as I can be. Have a great day. Maybe see you tomorrow.